Welcome to What Makes Us Human, a space where we have conversations about what makes us who we are. Each person comes in with their unique perspective to explore this age-old question. So let's welcome today's special guest. Dr. Mitchell Saskin is a clinical psychologist with a long-standing practice on the Upper West Side of Manhattan. The focus of his psychotherapy practice is providing assistance for individuals and couples who are struggling with life transitions and major life changes. He has over 30 years of experience as a psychotherapist in private practice, as well as consulting in public and independent schools throughout New York City. Dr. Saskin received his PhD in clinical psychology and is licensed in New York State as both a clinical and a school psychologist. While he has been analytically trained as a psychotherapist, Dr. Saskin has moved towards incorporating more alternative, mindful, and spiritual forms of treatment into his practice. This is primarily based on his own long-standing meditation and spiritual practices. He currently is an adjunct professor and co-faculty of the Spirit Mind Body Institute at Teachers College, Columbia University, where he specializes in teaching the integration of spirituality and psychotherapy. So welcome, Dr. Saskin.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
Thank you for being here. So just to start the conversation off, I want to ask you, from your perspective, what makes us human?
What a great question. Well, I think I'll start off with the sense that, in my belief, that we're spiritual beings in human form. So it really is the integration of our spirituality into our humanness and incorporating that into our humanness. So I feel that as we're having to make choices between kind of our evolutionary desires, which are to survive, to escape danger, safety, and also to transcend those evolutionary desires to flourish. And so I think to being human is really balancing those experiences. And actually, in working with people, it's even to be aware of those choices. So I think the greatest harm is when we just are acting instinctively and not having the space to make choices. And that space to make choices, I would even say that's spirituality, being able to not react automatically, or we react to, there's a greater sense of what we should do here, and being able to, whether for yourself or, for your community or for the world. So making those choices. So I guess that's like a good outline to kind of say, well, that's what being human is.
I think that's such an incredible way of putting it. And I'm actually curious to know a little bit more about what you mean when you say we are essentially spiritual beings in human form. How would you describe what a spiritual being is?
I would get a spiritual being connected to, or we are all connected to, this kind of dimension of interconnectedness. And so that we're all connected, whether it's energetically or a force beyond what we know in science, that we're all interconnected. And that interconnectedness, it's whether we call it God, love, that sense of compassion, whatever that is, that's spirituality, the sense of everything being connected and knowing that and feeling that everything is being.
Yeah, I very much resonate with that. And from this space of interconnectedness, you were talking about choices and also sometimes how the harm is in deciding instinctively. I want to ask you more about choice number one, and also how would you distinguish instinctiveness and intuition?
So instinctiveness, and this is really, I go back to evolutionary psychology, that our bodies and minds were created to survive here on Earth. That was the first aspect of it. And so that is deeply embedded in our physiology, how to survive, which means a sense of having a negative orientation, looking for danger, looking for things that could go wrong so we could survive. Also, the sense of self and other, or group and other. I think that to me, is probably in our times the most dangerous experience. The idea of the human kind of tendency, the evolutionary tendency to make distinctions between things and between people, and for this sense of protection, and also to assert out of danger and safety, to assert power over others, right? We feel powerful when we assert ourselves over others. So these are things that we're born with. And, in different psychologies, like in Jungian psychology, one could say these are the shadow, that we don't allow ourselves to feel it. And if we don't allow ourselves to feel it, we act them out. And so we could see in our own lives and in the world, these forces there. Now, this is the space, right? We have that space of what comes up kind of naturally. And then there's the space of being able to feel those instincts, as I would call them instincts, but not act on them. And that's where our humanness comes in, which makes us different, I believe, from other, species, as far as I know. The idea, the ability to feel these drives and not act on them. And that's the experience. So instincts is pushing us towards that, like the idea, and you could even feel it within ourselves. Like you see a stranger, there's a sense of danger, there's a sense of someone's different, and you can see how the world operates in that way, right? Even sense of things that should come naturally, but don't, like generosity. Like there's a sense of, wait, I don't know if that person deserves me to give them charity, right? All of these things that, if we're honest with ourselves, we all feel. Now, this is the sense of now stopping, in that sense, feeling that and not acting on it. And so then in not acting on it, we connect to this interconnectedness. We move away from just our personal or tribal survival and move into this field that says we're all connected. And so in this field of interconnection, there also is wisdom that is outside of just ourselves. And this I would call intuition. So the universe, or this interconnected field, is kind of wanting us to be our most authentic selves. So there's these forces. So one is to survive, and one is to be our most authentic selves, or to be in line with this interconnectedness. Now, this connection is communicated through this sense of intuition, synchronicities. That's how this interconnected field communicates with it.
That brings up another idea of how, at least in your life or in your practice, either as a psychotherapist or a professor, how do you see us moving from that drive towards the interconnectedness?
Yeah. And I think there's two ways, or there's probably many ways. But the first is, as I have been a long time meditation practitioner, right? So meditation, I think Buddha came up with this experience while he used different words, but it's the sense of being able to look at our experience, I would say, of our survival instincts, and being able so kind of connect with this interconnectedness through our consciousness that is separate from these survival instincts. So we have a consciousness which is connected to this interconnectedness that can observe. It's almost like this field is observing us and our instincts. And so by able to observing those instincts kind of with a space from this field, then there's a space to make choices. There's a space to observe, oh, this feeling is coming up. This instinct is as long as we have really very, I would say, strong honesty. And I think that's really what is missing in political correctness in the world, right? We need to have strong honesty that these are our feelings. There's nothing wrong with them. It's the choice whether to follow them. That as evolutionary human beings, these feelings are going to come up. But there is, if we kind of harness our consciousness through meditation and other practices, then we can use this interconnected field to observe it, and in that, not be able to act on it. And the second way, which I say, is also that if we consciously go to higher vibrational thoughts and actions, then we are kind of eliciting that field for us. So in a sense, which I would say kind of connects with the field of positive psychology, that we're going to this higher vibrational actions, which I would say, at least for our species, is not the default. So we have to kind of nurture them. And even culture would be a way of producing it and sharing it and being able to take those feelings, because it's in a sense by saying these things about generosity, love, compassion, being all connected, we are creating that vibrational field that connects to this interconnectedness.
No, that's beautiful. And, what I also heard when you were talking about honesty being a big ask of us, it also sounds a lot like acceptance too, because we have these instincts, we have these thoughts, and also accepting them and being honest in order to get to this higher vibrational state. That's something that came up for me when I was listening to you. And yeah, and even with this ability to vibrate higher, to choose differently, and having this ripple effect, it reminds me of this quote that hurt people, and heal people, heal people. And I'm curious to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, well, I think, just using the way you're looking at it, which I think is accurate, like we also separate, like if we look at this field, right, this loving, compassionate, interconnected field, we can look at our own personal psychologies in that way, right? So the parts of ourselves that we don't accept are kind of boundaried off from this interconnected field, so that in a sense they don't enter this sense of interconnectedness within ourselves or interconnectedness with everything. So again, and that's where you say hurt people, because it's not connected to this field. It acts out in a way, it expresses itself, because in a way, it's truthfully, in my estimation, all is for healing. So again, that in a sense, when we have these parts of ourselves that we don't accept, that we tend to act them out or feel shame around them. And what that does, it's preventing that feeling from being healed by entering this interconnected field. So in a way, as I see my work, it's helping people, be with these parts that they have excluded from themselves and allowing them to feel compassion and love for those who are letting light in that way. And so that's the healing. So again, in my sense, hurt is only hurting others because it wants to be healed.
I love that. And that's such a beautiful reframe as well. And it removes that learned helplessness. It removes that from the picture. And I also loved how you brought the fact of like interconnectedness, yes, in the field, but also within the self. And that's reminding me of the macrocosm and the microcosm, as above, so below. And really what's happening within us is what we're exerting outside of us as well. And it's all just an opportunity to reflect on what's happening within us.
Yeah. Yeah. No, and I think that's, our lives are mirrors of really what's internally. And I believe I believe we haven't been taught the spiritual mechanisms for growth. So we see things not being connected. And so when we see things happening to us in the world or that don't feel right, we don't attribute that to a projection of our own internal experience of things being cut off. We blame or we push away the reason, or it's random. That being able to see the universe is beautiful. It gives us infinite chances to change. And what we're just, it's always just reflecting what we're giving out, what's connected, what isn't connected. And being able to go through life in that experience, and there isn't mistakes. There isn't a sense, it's just a sense of, okay, let me reflect on what that happened. What is that within myself that I'm not getting in touch with, that is causing this to manifest in the world?
Yeah, and I think I just really love how you said that there are no mistakes. And there are also, in that way, no wrong choices because we just get to learn from them, like you're saying. And I think that also removes a lot of the perfectionism that maybe people on the healing path also have, or integration, wholeness, whatever we
Yeah.
want to call it. So how would you, or how have you experienced that journey of integration, and also for people listening in, the lack of perfection, like, or loosening perfectionism?
Yeah. Well, perfectionism is the lack of acceptance that as humans we're imperfect. And so I think the first part is we're imperfect, and being able to not just accept it, but celebrate, right? The idea of, yeah, we're imperfect. If, that's why we're here, to work through these imperfections, to learn. That's the beauty. Each of us is born into this life spiritually with many imperfections. And in this lifetime, we have the ability to, the universe will give us abilities to look at them, to be with them, to have compassion towards them. And that's our journey. So when someone who's perfect or tries to be perfect, I allow them to really dwell in their imperfections and know they could survive. See, this is where the evolutionary mind comes in, right? The idea of this feeling, well, I won't survive if I'm not perfect. But truthfully, we thrive and flourish from our imperfection.
I really like that because it gives so much permission for people to be, going back to what you said earlier, our authentic selves. The performance drops and we can come back to authenticity. And yeah, I'm curious to know more on how one can do that, and how do we also embrace our authentic selves and connect to these fields of love and compassion and generosity that you've already mentioned.
Yeah. Well, I think again, having that to understand, we've all experienced that. I mean, some more than others. The sense of feeling connected to others. In New York here, they had this basketball team, the Knicks, won this championship. And I don't know if they've shown things around the world, but it's been an outpouring of collective joy and effervescence. And that's because there's a sense of really sharing in this joy. And so this gave us an opportunity to really share these emotions that thrive, that flourish together, because we felt safe with everyone. And so I think we have to kind of really be with that on a greater basis, right? Being able to celebrate, to be together, right? To look at the things that bring us together, not apart. Now, that's not where the world's going presently, right? So in a way, and this is that we have to keep this perception despite what is events and reality in front of us, right? Because I think this is the hardest thing, right? That this field of interconnectedness is always there, but it's only accessible to the amount of point we pay attention to. So there are many distractions on this evolutionary kind of instincts that are going on right now. And so how, instead of battling these kind of instincts, which is the same thing, we're saying, oh, this is terrible. No, this is part of us. It's like how to sit with it and realize that these are things that are happening because we're not connected to this field of interconnectedness. And so it's not about fighting what's going on. It's about opening up this field of interconnectedness to kind of embrace it, to hold it, to take away that, to give choices in a sense to the world of making better choices. And now with that, I'm going to say we have to make a lot of changes in the world for that to happen. And one of the things media, see, when I talk about like positive psychology, or all those kind of higher vibrational experiences, media, because it's based on, more people doing it or scaring people, it brings up the lower vibrations. And then with, social media, it also, there you have a choice, because again, you have to be a consumer of what vibration you want. I'm not advocating not knowing what's going on in the world, just like not advocating knowing our own feelings of, negativity and things. But we have to make choices in terms of what we're going to feed ourselves. And so I think that's really important in a sense, that we have to, because we have unlimited choices now of what we're taking in. And it's the same thing with our minds. Like, we have to make choices of what we can stop what thoughts come up, but we could direct ourselves to what thoughts we bring attention to. And that is where I think, from a personal level of psychology and a worldwide level of energy, that in a sense, you have a choice where you want to put your attention. And that attention on this bigger thing for ourselves individually and for countries, for the world, that attention creates the reality.
You also said the word safety, and I think safety also plays a crucial role in this, both within the self and opening ourselves up to this field where there is discomfort, where there is opposition to some capacity. Even with the example with the Knicks, people felt the safety. That's where you use it. They felt the safety to feel this joy, but oftentimes there isn't that. So how do we also cultivate safety within the self so that we can also feel it in society and in any realm, whether that's culture, whether that's social media, whatever it may be?
Yeah. Well, I think the feeling of safety, we all have it, and we have to find it. Now, unfortunately, this is my field. Many people, because of how they grew up, it's harder for them to feel safety. And so with safety, and safety with people sometimes is scarier than safety in nature, or safety in a sense of connecting to this, this interconnected field. And we connect to this interconnected field in many ways, right? This sense of, some people do prayer, others do intention, some do, spiritual acts, practices. Others we all have our state of flow. We know what feels right to us. So again, it's being able to, kind of understand that and be able to kind of go towards it in a purposeful way. I think that's the part, that we all have that safety because we all are part of this interconnected field. But we have to find ways of connecting to it individually, and then taking that feeling and allowing that feeling to grow and prosper. So again, and I think a spiritual practice does that, and a spiritual practice comes from avoiding the mind, avoiding thinking, because thinking is from the past or the future. And the spiritual field is only in the present. So being in the present, so finding things through sensation, through doing, that you're in the present, not in the mind, not in thought, but in action. So if one realizes, and that's why people all do these things, but they don't say, why are we doing it? Right? People go out into nature, they hike, they have these experiences, or even, our conversations. There's a sense of feeling as we talk, right? There's a feeling. There's a feeling beyond, I just want to think what my next answer is. There's a feeling of connection. And if people look for that, and being in interpersonal relationships the same way, it's there. So you have to kind of look for it. Again, it's the same thing. We have a choice. That's the human experience. We have the choice to go towards this fear that we're born with, or to look towards this feeling of flourishing, of connection that is always there, but we have to look towards.
And that reminds me of what you said a little earlier about, choosing where we direct our attention. And the more we do that, like you said, a practice, the more we practice that as well, the more natural, I assume, it becomes too. And with this idea of connection and, what you're talking about, this felt connection that's there, this interpersonal dimension in this human experience. I'm curious to hear more about that, with this deeper interconnectedness and the human connectedness, I guess. How do those play out?
Well, I kind of tried to do this, like in my sessions in therapy, right? Because again, it's hard in the world with a lot of distractions, right? It's about really, and it's a feeling of being present with someone, right? Being with them. And it's hard to there's a sense that this field of consciousness, this interconnectedness, that we can feel it with another person. But to feel it, we have to kind of bring our attention to it and our attention to the relationship with another person, or that field between us. So I think, again, like what I try to do when I work with people is stay in that presence with that person. And that person experiences that presence. And in a way, even if a person isn't used to their own presence, they feel it, and it starts to kind of create that safety, in a sense, and that feeling of safety. So we feel safe when we feel the other person is present.
Yeah, and that's also reminding me of, holding space for others and cultivating a space where presence is even permitted, And I like, whether it's in your practice, whether it's with your students, how do you personally hold that space for presence with another?
So with that, I kind of feel this space, and I feel this expanding space that emanates, from myself initially, but then connects with others. So it really is it's a vibration that kind of connects. And so, and what, it's interesting, what stops that field is kind of self-awareness, self-doubt. So what I'm always trying to do is kind of be present, and that's being present, right? Self-awareness, as soon as you're self-aware of thinking or doubting, is this good or not, you're out of it. So I'm trying to cultivate a sense of being in the moment, trusting that whatever is coming out, like what I'm doing with you today, whatever is coming out is for the highest good. And so that is the greatest, I guess, detriment, is identification with a self, and then whether an over-identification, which would be kind of a narcissism, or an under-identification would be poor self-esteem. So, and this is where I'm kind of, and we have to get out of that consciousness of we misinterpret, and I think this is something I've been thinking about. Consciousness is this field that we're talking, interconnected field. But that interconnected field within ourselves, we misinterpret as self-conscious. And so in a way, when we don't know that part that we have internalized is part of that bigger field, we just nurture our self-consciousness. But that nurturing is separate from that bigger field of consciousness. So, and again, it's remembering. And the way you do that is when you're becoming self-conscious, right? Remembering that field, that's an illusion, that it really is just part of this bigger field of consciousness, of interconnectedness. And so that's where I would call presence. It's shifting from self-awareness. And when I say self-awareness, it's like internal rumination, to this sense of being connected to all, and that all that is coming through you is coming from that bigger field. and is connecting to everyone else from that bigger field.
Such a beautiful way to navigate life as well, I feel. I think what you said about trust also, right? Like how you said you're trusting that whatever is even being shared here is for the highest good. I want to know a little bit about your journey with trust and how we cultivate that. And, with everything that you've shared, with presence, with acknowledgement that there is this larger field, and removing the small self and seeing how we are part of a larger whole. Yeah, what is your journey with trust been like?
Well, I think I think this is a sense of this is why we're here, because it can't be known intellectually. It has to be known through experience. And so the universe is giving us these experiences where we have a choice to constrict or expand. And I found in my life, the earlier part of my life, I constricted. But there was and I don't know why for me, I tapped into knowing that constriction, that I knew there was something greater than that constriction. And again, everybody is on a different journey or karma in this lifetime. So again, being able to move towards that expansion for myself, and then realizing that moving towards that expansion with others, right? And that every time fear came up and I constricted, that I didn't feel good. The interaction didn't feel good. And so the idea, and knowing that constriction was, that earlier identification with my evolutionary kind of, humanness, as well as my upbringing. So my whole life has been learning to feel constriction, and then move to expansion, making that choice. But this is really, nobody's life, as Buddha said, suffering is part of life, right? But in a sense, being able to see things that are unpleasant in your life, but holding a greater perspective of that, knowing that discomfort is bringing some truth or healing on that greater aspect. And so that really is something, like I could say that, but in my life, there's been sickness, there's been, separations, there's been deaths, there's been all kinds of stuff, like anything. But understanding that each of those experiences, while brought loss and suffering, that they also brought expansion. And so how to be able to feel that, and it's again what your attention is, right? It's because we could look at what is lost, or we could stay in that long, that bigger perspective, and see from that what was lost, what greater was gained. And so again, it's a philosophy, but again, I go to Buddha a lot. He says, I can't just tell you this. You have to experience it. And with that, and I see with my clients, I have this great, perch where I could see it within myself, but I could see it with others. So I could see these, laws of spirituality working over and over again with people who never would have, unless, where there has been that transformation of being able to do that. So to me, there's a knowing. And well, it's an interesting thing, there's a knowing, but there has to be a knowing while you're in a not knowing.
Yeah.
Right? So you have to tolerate. See, that's really the part of it, which is really hard. We connecting with this field, because you don't get the answers right away. So you have to kind of sit in the not knowing, trusting that there's a knowing intelligence operating through that not knowing, which I guess one would call faith, I guess.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. And I loved how you shared about moving through constriction and then to expansion and everything else that you shared. And one thing that came up for me as you were talking about that is how you said we have to feel it, right? Like we can explain it, we can talk about it, but we can't actually know it unless we experience it. And that brought up the idea of also bypass, and how a lot of people, especially in this day and age where spirituality is also getting a massive boom, there is this sense of using that language and sometimes even using therapy language to bypass the discomfort of the constriction to reach the expansion. So, yeah, what are your thoughts on that?
It's an addiction. It's the same thing as any addiction. Addictions are a inability to deal with the not knowing, the emptiness, and jumping to a relief of that in an artificial way, whether it's drugs, relationships. It's jumping to that. I look at it in the sense of jumping to the stimulation, right? We're stimulated, but we're not embodied, right? So this embodied is that integration. And stimulation is always temporary. It's not something that we kind of bring in and it's with us always. So that's really, so whether any addiction, it's filling that emptiness. And a spiritual addiction is the same, going from one practice to the other, going and getting ecstatic experiences, right? The ecstatic experiences are just a window into knowing what's within ourselves. It's not outside of ourselves. It's within ourselves. That's why I'm saying that consciousness is with it. Is again, a spiritual bypass is saying that, I'm connecting to this higher consciousness, whatever it is. There's no connecting to it. We are connected to it. And it's realizing that we're always connected to it. And so you don't need to have these ecstatic experiences. They're great when you have to kind of break, the evolutionary aspects. That's why, psychedelics are helpful in that way. But they have to be integrated. It's in the sense of, okay, now you're aware of this big field. How do you now own that big field for yourself? That this is not, in a way, it's showing reality, these experiences. Not that the spiritual we're going to go here. This is what reality is every moment. And being able to be with that and feel that every moment is, or when you lose it, to come back to it, right? Because we can't feel it every moment. That's our human condition, right? But being able to know in faith that it's always there. And it's within us. It's not out there.
That's such a beautiful way, I feel, also to just capture the human experience and what it is to be human, because I think it ties so beautifully with your opening remark as well of we are essentially spiritual beings wrapped in human form. On the other end, where people go out to search for these spiritual experiences, but okay, once we've tasted them, how do we actually bring it back into who we are, where we are, and how we navigate the world? So I just think that's such a beautiful circle. So I think with that, I want to end with my final question, which is, what is the most human experience that you've ever had?
Well, that's a good question. I'm going to pause for that.
Yeah.
I think the most human experience I ever had was, I guess, it's interesting. What comes up is loss.
Wow.
Because I think loss is a sense of, being not in the physical realm anymore, right? And then how to expand past what has happened in the physical realm to connect to this greater realm and knowing there's connection. Now, I'll be even more personal. Like when my parents passed away about 10 years ago, 10 years ago, and and I had issues with my parents growing up, and that was a lot of what has created my journey in that way, my spiritual journey of my soul, as we call it. And I would gather in their loss, there was a sense of letting go of all that kind of resentment or earthly resentment, and being able to connect to them as spiritual beings, as they are now. And being able to feel them and to feel closer to them in that way. So I think for me, that was most human experience. It was about, transcending what, whatever we could say karmically or spiritually I was given, and realizing that I've been on my journey and they were part of that journey. And now kind of honoring them as spirits and knowing even in their own personalities, there's a sense of a greater closeness to me, because all those things that maybe they couldn't do because of their own personalities, now they're open. And so we could be fully present with each other in that way that maybe we couldn't have been in life.
Wow, that was really, really beautiful. And I think poignant too. And thank you for sharing that with me, with whoever listens in. It means a lot. Yeah.
It's my pleasure.
So thank you, Dr. Saskin. Thank you for being here. And it has been such a rich conversation.
It's my pleasure always speaking with you and sharing, because again, it's about these vibrations and being able to share those vibrations so others can sense them and to go with them, right? So it isn't, again, and I think this is really important for all of us, right? To share our authentic truth, because in that authentic truth, that vibration affects others in that authentic way.
Thank you for tuning in. If this conversation stayed with you, share it with someone you think would feel it too. And if you have your own answer to the question, I'd love to hear it. Until next time.